Welcome to the rollout of the revised SimPub workflow. We will be walking you through the changes that have been made to the SimPub process. Next. This rollout is a culmination of a joint review and analysis of the existing process by content digitization, content development, and production. Now that the process has been in place for more than a year, we have over the last 3 months reviewed the existing process and all of the associated activities performed by the various roles. We made changes where we felt it was necessary, and we now believe we have a more aligned process where the tasks are appropriately assigned. Brenda will now walk you through an overview of the changes for each role.
Thanks, Wendy. Many of the changes to the workflow seem small, but should have a big impact. For instance, we're more clearly aligned the responsibilities with the roles for SimPub, so what happens on the PDF is also followed on the digital process for SimPub. So in this revised workflow, we have the CD focused on the pedagogy, and we have the CPM managing the schedule, vendors, and reviews the MindTap reader. These roles for the CD and the CPM should be quite familiar to you. They're similar to what you do on PDFs. The CDPM will continue to focus on XML for its structure, consistency, and accuracy. So let's take a closer look at each of the roles. First up, we have the content developer, and we'll look at the CD or content developer's roles and responsibilities. So new for the CD, we ask that they include the CDPM on the to-design routing in IPS. The announcement about this change already went out to the CDs middle of June, and they should know about this change. If they don't, and they forget to include the CDPM on the to-design routing, we ask that CPMs and the CL indent site leads be on the lookout for this and fix the routing. So that is just to update the routing in IPS. And then follow up with that content developer and let them know they missed the CDPM. Also note, as you saw in a earlier slide, the CDPM job title is changing, and it's changing to Digital Content Specialist. And that title change is now reflected in all the documentation related to SimPub. It's available on the vendor information portal and on the GPM Doc Center. The change will also be made in IPS to the project team and to the various dashboards that we all use. So that change is coming soon. Unchanged for the CDs is that they are invited to attend the attend the transmittal meeting, and we ask them some questions, and the CPM asks them some questions, and they review the MindTap reader. So their review of the MindTap reader is, as I said, similar to what they do on the PDFs, and we recognize that some projects are more intense than others, need a higher level of scrutiny and oversight by members of the team. So if the CD wishes to be more hands-on with the XML, then that is what should be discussed at the transmittal meeting. For instance, if that CD insists that they log bugs in Jira rather than the CPM, let's talk, right? What I also want to point out that's unchanged is the CD will continue to work with the CPM and end-to-end project manager just as they do now. They just no longer are reporting bugs in or logging them in Jira. That is something that would fall to the CPM. So there are lots of streamlining of roles, like the CPM is taking a more closer look at the MindTap, and the CD is taking a slightly lesser close look at the MindTap files, because that's what happens on the PDFs. So speaking of the Content Project Manager, the CPM is responsible for assigning and or checking that the XML workflow spec is in IPS, and they do that they need to check it for accuracy about 1 month before the start of design. The assignment of the XML workflow and the assignment of the compositor, those things happen earlier when the project is reviewed, maybe at the proposal stage, depending on the production location. And that activity and responsibility of getting the initial XML workflow entered in IPS is typically done by the discipline-aligned CPM, or it could be something done by the CL end-to-end site lead. So it's not an end-to-end project manager responsibility to assign the vendor and assign the XML workflow, but it is their responsibility to look at the XML workflow before the project starts or when the project starts to make sure it's accurate. The additional, we have the CPM invites the CDPM as an optional attendee to the transmittal meeting. They are not required to attend. They will receive the transmittal agenda, and they will also receive the meeting summary notes. Now, if the CDPM has questions for the CPM or others at the meeting and they cannot attend, or they have responses to questions that were posed in the agenda to them, then the CDPM will respond in advance at the meeting. So a little more detail here. Let's dive into these 6 questions we have the CPM or the end-to-end PM asking at the transmittal meeting. So just bear in mind that transmittal meeting at some locations has other names. It may be a project launch or a launch meeting. So these 6 questions, they should have already been incorporated into your meeting location's agenda for this particular meeting. And if they haven't been already, they will be soon. These questions were created based on feedback gathered from production, development, digital, and vendors. So these aren't just things we thought would be nice to ask. These are important questions to gather answers to and to note in your transmittal meeting summary. So we're going to go one by one through these. A good portion of the workflow focuses on these questions, so we're going to take a little time to highlight them. First question is, which is the priority, print or digital? So what this question is getting at is we recognize that the same team is working on finalizing the product, and at some point, that team, they can only finalize one set of files. They can work and focus on finalizing print, or they can work and focus on finalizing digital. Once they finalize one, they then turn their attention to the other, okay? So with that in mind, we want to ask this question, is print first, is digital or it's digital first? And then we have gained a little more time for one or the other. For example, if the digital is wrapped up first, that may give our partners in the global product technology team a day, a couple of days, a week even, to make that MindTap reader interactive. That's really critical. If they have we have an interactive MindTap reader, days can really matter to have a product done and ready in time for our customers. So if it's print that's more important, and getting the files to the printer is critical because we have some commitment, then let's do that first. The next question is the CPM or the content developer the primary reviewer? So this is getting back to what I said a little while ago about the content developer's role. They are looking at the pedagogy, so they're not looking in depth generally at every nuance of the pages and of the SimPub. But if they're more hands-on with the PDFs, they're likely going to be more hands-on with the MindTap review. So it's good to ask that question then, so you know how involved is this CD going to be. Also, to ask, is there more than one content developer on this project? If so, who's the lead content developer? So the third question, when does the preview XML need to be reviewed? Well, how early in the schedule should this occur? In the new SimPub workflow, we've moved the preview XML to be a little later in the project than where it has been currently. It's been too early, and so there's been a disconnect between the preview XML and the actual XML happening for the core project. So we've moved it to be at the conclusion of first pass pages, or at least 2 weeks in advance of the release of the XML. So if there's a preview chapter, preview chapter that's needed for demo, then obviously this needs to happen earlier. The preview XML needs to happen earlier. So this is why it needs to be asked at the transmittal meeting. Next up, we have question number 4. Should XML delivery be batched? In our current or older process at this point, the batched XML was only used on complex quantitative titles. We're expanding this so that it's an option for other titles. If the project is a very large monster of a project, you maybe don't want to wait and get all of your XML in one big chunk at the end of second pass pages. Get it in batches during second pass pages. Those batches, however, if we go that route and you have batches, they need to be at least 3 or more chapters. And the batch should, if it's not chapter based, could be around 150 to 250 pages. So batching is okay, and it's something that this could change in the middle of a project. You're into copy edit, past the transmittal meeting, or you're going into composition or first pass pages, and you realize we got to batch this project for one reason or another. Then talk with your CDPM, talk with your CD, make sure everyone's on board with this, and make that change. So if you have a project that is batched, we have 2 tabs in the weekly service status report that we want you to remember to fill out. One's new and one's already in place. We've made some changes to the weekly service status report, and those are, well, we no longer have XML first, and we have some new wording for some fields in IPS, and we want that reflected in all our documentation, including the weekly service status report. So that's you'll see on tab 5, which is where the batched schedule is for SimPub projects in the weekly service status report. We've also separated the columns for PDF and XML delivery so that we can clearly see the dates those are delivered as separate entities, since they are 2 separate things. Of course, we want them delivered on the same date, but what if they don't happen on the exact same date? We have that recorded here. And then the tab 10, we have added a brand new tab, and that is to help synchronize the release of these batched chapters or batches of XML and PDF so that it's very clear to everyone who receives these batches that the XML is reflecting the PDF pass of second pass pages or third pass pages or whatever it happens to be. So it's very clearly marked. What am I looking at? Because there was some confusion as we batched projects that content developers had already seen those errors and marked them up in the PDF that they're now seeing in the XML. Hopefully we won't see that going forward, but this way it's very clear what version of the XML, what version of the PDF the XML is matched up with. So next we have question 5. When should the SendDoc XML be captured at what pass of pages? So most projects will continue to follow the standard of having the XML tagging occur between first and second pass pages. However, we want that flexibility of, what if we have a project with very heavy corrections in second pass pages? Well, if you as a CPM or end-to-end PM know this, you know this going in, maybe at the transmittal meeting when these questions are asked, that this author has heavy corrections in second pass pages, a very involved author, or this is a first edition. So you can talk about what pass of pages should we then generate the XML. Maybe it's after second pass. So that's something to talk about at the transmittal meeting. And if something changes later, you realize you learn more about this project. Like I said, a first edition, you don't know everything at the beginning that's going to happen on the project. This can change. You can change this. Say you're in copy edit and you realize tagging after the second pass pages or at second pass pages is not ideal. You can change that. The key here is to communicate if a change is made and to discuss it if need be with the CDPM and the CD and make sure everyone is aware. The last question, is there additional non-print MindTap reader content? Well, this is a question that we've been asking about for the whole project, but we want to know a little more, and that is we want to identify the digital-only content, and that if it's not appearing in the printed book, where is it appearing? It's going in the MindTap reader. When will it be transmitted? What services are required of that content? And here's the key one, is how does it integrate into the MindTap reader? Knowing that as early as possible helps down the road when we get this content delivered to our digital production team to help make an integrated MindTap reader. So a little more for the content project manager here. We want to just highlight that the CPM will continue to maintain the overall project schedule and keep the team informed of any changes to that schedule. The CPM receives and reviews, monitors the weekly service status report, and they notify the CD and of any issues that are occurring, and just keeps them abreast of what's happening on the project. In addition, we have a new system that we've all received an overview training on, and that's Jira. And this Jira is going to be used to track the project, and we'll go into that a little more detail later in this presentation. So, for instance, the CDPM is creating a master Jira ticket, and it's important that the vendor contact information be listed on that master ticket. So the CPM is responsible for providing that name to the CDPM. So also we have that the Jira, just to highlight, the Jira is going to be used to notify you of when pages are available. So when XML pages, or not pages, pardon me, when XML passes are available, that's noted in Jira, but that's also where the bugs are logged. And as a CPM, that's what you will be logging, any bugs. These aren't content corrections. These are errors with errors in the MindTap reader. So, and using the MindTap review checklist will help you find any errors in the MindTap XML in MindTap QA. So moving on to the CDPM, like I said, that the CDPM is going to be included on the to-design routing, and they're invited to the transmittal meeting, and they send their responses to any MindTap reader queries prior to the meeting to the CPM. And they create the Jira master ticket for the MindTap reader, and they will also, in that MindTap reader ticket, identify if an SPI is required for the project, or if an SPI is not required. So that's where that information will be found. What we see Jira as doing is taking the place of having an email sent back and forth saying, have I got the SPI? Is there an SPI? Where is the SPI? Because in fact, the SPI will be attached to the Jira master Jira ticket. And if there are any updates to the SPI, they will be found, the updated SPI, on the master Jira ticket. So one of the things that you'll see here that I want to highlight is that we no longer use ProdShare for posting or sharing files. That was part of our prior process. And so that this is one of the, I hope, happy news. Another one that I forgot to highlight a moment ago was the CPM spot check is gone. It's been replaced by that review checklist that we do. And that's the MindTap review checklist is not far different from what you already check on a set of PDFs. Just a few more items for you to see and do, and to be aware that your CDPM is doing. So the CDPM, just a little more. As I mentioned, the CDPM is working in Jira, and so they're quite familiar with it, have been using it for a while. So they have more expertise than you at this point on using Jira. So they use Jira to triage all the bugs that are submitted. There are high critical, medium level bugs that they address. They help get resolved, that they maybe address them to the composition vendor, and the composition vendor then fixes whatever it is that they need to fix, and then the ticket can be closed. And so that's how we'll use Jira during production of our projects. And the CDPM is going to be the one, creating the master ticket, finalizing the XML and geyser, and updating the digital production complete date, among many other tasks. And some of these are in Jira. As I mentioned, the Jira master ticket has a lot of information related to the project, and some are in other systems. But there's a lot of tasks, and you'll see this fully listed on the SimPub workflow roles and responsibilities document. So next up, we have Sam.
Thanks, Brenda. Okay, so I just wanted to talk first about JIRA in a little bit more detail. While we've had the training sessions, as Brenda's mentioned, and some of the points in the next slide have already been discussed, just wanted to show how and where JIRA fits into the overall SimPub workflow for CPMs. The use of JIRA is really the biggest change to the SimPub workflow for the CPMs. And we are putting together more documentation that will support CPMs in their use of JIRA, more detailed step-by-step how to clone tickets, how to enter information into the system correctly, and how to monitor what's going on with a project within JIRA. So, and also, as Brenda mentioned, the CDPMs are very familiar with JIRA. They use it extensively in digital production. Most content developers have also been using JIRA for the past year or so to log XML bugs, and the production vendors also have experience with JIRA tickets being assigned to them for XML issues. So JIRA is the system that will be replacing all other forms of communication about the XML, things that we used to communicate using Word documents, Excel grids, emails, phone calls. All of that information about the XML status, the tasks related to XML, and any problems related to the XML will be logged in JIRA. JIRA will record all of the bugs and the resolution for that project. So the CDPM will be setting up a master ticket for each project early on. This will happen most likely during the first pass pages stage before we start to do preview XML. The key stakeholders on the team will be added to the master ticket and therefore will receive notifications from JIRA each time an update is made to that master ticket. Next slide. So the CDPM, as I said, creating the master ticket at the start of the project. So it's basically a folder, and it contains the other tickets and items related to the project. The SPI will be posted here, the special processing instructions, and any updates to the special processing instructions will also be posted to the master ticket. It also logs all of the activities and creates a history for the project. So as an example, when we get to the preview XML stage, the production vendor will be notifying the CPM and CDPM through the JIRA master ticket that the preview XML has been gone through QA checks and is now ready for Cengage review. The CDPM will start doing their review, and then if they feel that it is appropriate for the content developer and CPM to begin their section of review, they'll create a subtask ticket in JIRA to notify them that the preview XML is now ready. The CPM or content developer will be providing feedback on the preview XML by using JIRA bug tickets. The bug tickets will go through a group that triages those tickets and assigns them to the rightful owner. In most cases, it will be the CDPM. The CDPM will then review each of the tickets that has been entered, each of the issues that have been found in the XML, and then they will address the bug tickets to the next owner. They might go back to the content developer or the CPM for clarification on the issue that has been reported, or they will assign it to the vendor to fix and address the problem. And this set of activities will be repeated when we do the core XML, whether that's done in batches or as a single deliverable of the full book of chapters, and also when we do the final XML review. Can you switch? Thanks. Okay, so now that's about JIRA. Now I want to talk about some changes that have happened in IPS, specifically about the schedule fields that we will be using to track SimPub activities. So we had originally had several schedule fields in IPS related to tracking XML. We have simplified those fields and renamed them so that they're clearer on what the activities are related to each of the steps of the SimPub process. These fields are now live in IPS. It says go live by June 30th. They are all live in the IPS schedule screen. They are also live in the selected titles panel of both the education production dashboard and of the digital dashboard. There is still some programming work to be done to have these fields active in the dashboard search panel, and that's the panel in the upper left-hand corner of the dashboard. Although we don't feel that this is probably the way that most people will be looking for their SimPub projects. It's just yet another set of data points that can be used to search for the titles. That searching programming has to be done in an IPS build. It requires developer work, so that is slated to happen in August. So the sample XML field has been renamed now to say Preview XML. The field called First Pages XML Received has been disabled. If you're working on an active project where the where the IPS proposal has existed, then this field will still be there in the schedule. I would recommend that you just go ahead and delete out the line, remove it from the schedule so there's no confusion. You won't be able to add it to a schedule, and it won't appear in any newly created proposals going forward. The Second Pages XML field has been changed to Core XML, and that will have a begin and an end date because we expect many projects will be batched. If the project happens to have a single XML deliverable at the core review stage, then the same date will go into beginning and end. And then the last date we have is the final XML received. This is akin to receiving final pass pages. It's not saying that the XML is 100% complete, but just like when we receive final print PDFs, there may be some additional changes that happen after that. But this is to indicate what we expect to be the last deliverable of XML. And again, all of these dates are related to the receipt of the XML. So once the vendor has alerted us that the XML has been posted, has been ingested into Geyser and posted to MTQA for our review, that's the date that the CPM will be putting into the schedule. And the final topic I'd like to talk about is the SimPub MindTap review checklist. So we have, there were a number of checklists floating around before, and we have streamlined those documents into a single checklist. Can you flip to the next slide, please? And that is the roles and responsibilities for the content developer, the CDPM, and the CPM for reviewing the XML at both the preview and the core XML stages. So the purpose of the checklist is to reinforce the roles that Brenda talked about earlier in this presentation, to maximize the use of everyone's time and to ensure efficiencies by not duplicating efforts if that's not required. The checklist does include more CPM checking of the XML content than in the past, but the content developer was asked or tasked with doing many things that really are CPM's responsibility, such as checking whether the ISBN is valid, the author name is valid, the cover image is the correct one for the product. So those tasks have been moved to the content project manager to handle. And as we look at the checklist, which will open in just a minute, you'll see that the CDPM still have the most tasks. Because the content in the print PDFs and the XML will be synced together, we expect that the primary function, primary thing that will be happening during the XML review really is looking at the XML structure, and we should have to spend less time worrying about content issues or errors that appear in a MindTap reader that don't appear in the print pages. I also want to say that the checklist is designed to be flexible. Some disciplines have historically had greater CPM involvement in the review of the MindTap reader. And in that case, it's perfectly fine to use the checklist as a basis and then determine who on the team will be taking each of the tasks in terms of checking within the MindTap reader. We just want to be sure that everybody is communicating about who is checking what, so there's no duplication of efforts. Can you open the checklist, please? So you'll see that the checklist here, we have specified the roles again at the top, that the digital content specialist / CDPM will be focusing on the XML and the functionality within the reader. The CPM will be validating for formatting and consistency within the reader, and the content developer is looking at the pedagogy in the reader, that the features are performing and as we expect them to, that they're placed where we expect them to be, and that the flow of the reader is supporting the pedagogy of the product. So that's divided into two sections, a preview XML review and then the core book XML review. The preview XML review is focused on the structure of the XML and not necessarily the content of the chapter. Sometimes our preview XML will also be used as a demo product shown to potential adopters or as a class test. In that case, we want to be diligent about checking the XML and the content. And in that case, I would recommend that the team uses the core XML review, which includes a lot more steps in checking content. And that is the MindTap review checklist. Thank you.
Right. Thank you all. And if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me, Sam or Wendy, and me. I'm Brenda Ginty. We have Samantha Ross Miller and Wendy Traeger. Or go to your manager with any questions, or for end-to-end C or CL end-to-end site lead. And for international, feel free to get in touch with any of us or anyone else who listens to this presentation. Thank you all.